Welcome to Produce Talks.
This whole business is based on relationship and friendships.
Food is darn simple.
What can we do? What are other countries doing?
How important it is for industry to be talking about this.
We're going back to the farm. We're going back to the whole food.
Hello and welcome to Produce Talks, the CPMA podcast. This episode, we aim to cover automation and robotics in the produce supply chain. Throughout this pandemic, a question that keeps popping into my head is, will COVID-19 accelerate automation? For produce, automation can take place at several points, including fields and greenhouses, in pack houses and processing plants, in retail and food distribution centers. My first guest is Hussam Haroun, Director of Automation at Vineland Research and Innovation Center. Welcome, Hussam.
Hello, Ian. Thanks for having me over.
Yeah, for sure. So this episode, I'm hoping to share and cover a landscape of the future of robotics and automation in produce. It's a big topic. One of the reasons that I really want to cover this area is because we know that labor is an ongoing challenge for growers. But you look across several sectors in other industries and across our supply chain, and you really have to wonder, will COVID-19 accelerate workplace automation? So that's really the big kind of question that I'm hoping to cover. So to get started, maybe you can expand on the role of automation in the produce sector and how it ties into that topic of labor.
So if you look at producers and processors, they have vegetables and fruits in Canada, right, as part of the horticulture sector, automation is really planned to ease the pressure of the cost of labor that's already been lagging behind over the last couple of years. There's already a barrier to entry for using these automation technologies, right? So there's a need where we can bring robotic systems and in applications and cases where the business case makes sense and look at technologies that already exist in the industry today and how do we bridge them with the end users who are the producers and how they can use them as well.
Right, yeah. And so it's not necessarily always about replacing so much as it is optimizing.
And filling a gap. So optimization is a big part of that. And I think the biggest question is filling the gap. Over the last couple of months, one of the things that we've done here is try to talk to a lot more, even before COVID, pre-COVID, talk to a lot more growers and see where the challenges are. And I'm going to use an example of a mushroom farmer where we visited their farm, and they had about 16 rooms where they actually do the production of mushrooms, harvesting of mushrooms, where they couldn't use about 25% of their rooms because they didn't have enough workers to be able to fill those other rooms and to be help with the production. So there's already a gap there inherently in the industry that needs to be filled. So robotics or automation itself at the beginning, what it will do, it will fill these gaps as a beginning. Eventually, as these gaps are being filled, you can look at opportunities of optimization. How do you optimize what's already working and needs a little bit more improvement to reduce the cost of labor?
So that kind of leads into my next question having to do with ROI. And I mean, if you're a farmer, that's got to be the biggest question mark when you're looking at the feasibility of an automated harvesting system. And not just for farmers, but in pack houses and warehouses, in retail distribution centers and so on. That ROI question, is top of mind.
I usually, when it comes to the discussion of ROI and cost, I like to usually ask the end users, the people who are going to end up using this and benefiting from the farmer. You can put this question out there to the manufacturers who are going to try to put together these systems and sell them to the farmers or lease them out. But really, how does it benefit you as the farmer or as the producer? We usually develop, typically when we look at a business case and look at the industry was accepting of a 4-year payback for these solutions. Because the long-term objective of these solutions is to reduce the cost of labor, and the payback over 4 years makes sense with the amount of technology that you're putting in and you're setting up in the farms. When I talked to one of the farms and I said, okay, if we decide to give you a solution to fill some of the gaps that you have today, what are you looking at spending? What would be, from your point of view, how would you spend? One guy mentioned to me, and it was very interesting. He said, we as farmers, we look at an investment in an example of a pickup truck. I tried to understand what that means. He said, if you look at a pickup truck, if I have to go out and buy a $60,000 pickup truck, that's an investment that I plan for on an annual basis. That's not a bad investment. So if you look at what kind of investment in terms of return on investment, they look at it from the point of, a $60,000 machine that could fit in within their business case, but how many of those 60,000 machines can fill the gaps to give you the same payback and the ROI that you're looking for?
Right.
So that was an eye-opener, and then we had to go back and see how that plays out in the general business case.
Mm-hmm. So talking about ROI a bit more, how can companies measure potential ROI?
So one of the biggest challenges that we talked about earlier, and I think is for the adoption of automation, right? I think the biggest challenge that still exists today is having that solution. And I'm going to use the word solution carefully because it does play out in the ROI. It's not the machine, the robotic machine that you bring in and you put into the farm that is just the only part of the business case. It's how does that machine fit in with the current structure or architecture or infrastructure in the farm, and does the solution work for a specific type of farmer? So it needs to be a system that is integrated using a system integrator.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to measure that ROI, you have to be able to understand the operations of the farmer, both as a provider of that solution and as an operations person for that solution. So to be able to understand both the operational of the farm, the infrastructure of the farm, will help basically the end users to be able to better understand the return on investment. If the capital investment is too high, sometimes that's a huge barrier to taking in, even though if the operational costs are very low, because that initial capital investment could be a problem, right?
Yeah.
If the capital investment is so low, but operationally you're going to require a lot more into it to run it and to operate it, or more machines, or to still, it's not compensating the labor costs more over the long term, that could also be another challenge or hesitation to implementing it.
Mm-hmm.
So these two have to be measured properly, both on the capital front as well as on the operational front.
Gotcha. So talking more about the advances in automation and robotics, I've read, over the last couple of years, a lot about how new technologies are coming out and how the industry is shifting in this direction. Just about however industry is shifting towards automation. What are the remaining barriers that are, possibly slowing down that shift towards automation?
That's a great question, Ian. The biggest challenge that we're finding now for that slow uptake of automation is the knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. The end user doesn't have the time to basically understand the business case, do an assessment of the technical capabilities, the financial cost, the long term, the solutions that needs to be put together, right? They don't have the time to do that, right? Another issue is in this industry, which is a niche industry, there's not one company or person you can go to, what we call a system integrator. There's no system integrator to basically help the end users improve or increase the adoption of automation technologies. That's a big barrier that we're finding.
It's interesting because it sounds like it's similar to some of the initial challenges we've been hearing with blockchain, where companies that are implementing blockchain on all these different systems that are not necessarily integrated or compatible with one another. Is that similar?
Yeah, no, that's exactly the point. An automation solution in farming and horticulture or in food processing has so many parameters and so many capabilities. You have the software, advanced artificial intelligence, machine learning capabilities, and you have hardware, electronics, electrical, mechanical, so different areas of expertise, right? And you also have the operational and the health and safety aspect of it, right? There's so many areas that you need one house that can look at everything, understand the operational of the end user, and basically marry those two together. And if you look at the horticulture industry, there's no one solution that fits all. So you can't have one for the berry farmers versus the mushroom farmers versus the cucumber or the greenhouse farmers. Each solution needs to be customized for a specific crop or architecture farm, basically.
So who plays that role of system integrator? Is that a company? Is that government policy? Is that is it innovation centers such as yourselves? Like, who plays that role?
That's a great question. I can tell you this. Over the last couple of months, Vineland has been trying to see is an opportunity to bring a lot of those pieces, a lot of those organizations, stakeholders that you mentioned together. So we need the grower associations on the table. We need government involved as well, regulators, right? And you also need manufacturers. You need part manufacturers. You need other people from different industries. So, for example, automotive manufacturers, you need those guys in to come in and see the opportunity that exists in the horticulture industry. There's a huge opportunity for them to innovate there. Just the greenhouse vegetable market itself, automation there for the top 3-4 crops we're talking about: tomato, cucumber, peppers. It's a $4 billion industry potential globally, right? So there's a huge opportunity for these companies from other industries to come in and sit on the table with the grower associations, with the government, with research centers like us, and have strategic sessions to see what's the best way of developing a system integration mechanism for these growers.
We always talk about it, but that's that collaboration, right? That comes in between industry, government, and associations and organizations such as ourselves.
Correct.
So talking about harvest automation a little bit more, one thing that we covered on a past episode is the challenges of automation with produce. And I mean, you touched on automotive a little bit, but agriculture and produce can present its own challenges in terms of not necessarily always having a controlled environment, right? You have variation, you have fragility, you have to have defect detection. What advances in automation technology have come out recently or are coming down the pipe, to help with these challenges in horticulture harvesting?
So, frankly, all parts of the sectors can benefit from automation technologies. But if you look at the industry in a whole, from pre-harvesting to harvesting to post-harvesting, which includes packaging and basically putting the produce on the shelves, right? On the pre-harvesting and the post-harvesting, there's already a lot of technologies out there. Our advancement has been made on solutions that you can they're off-the-shelf solutions. You can take them in, get an integrator to come and help you put it together, and basically you can get things going with the business case as well. The challenge is with the harvesting. Anything that requires the human aspect. For example, when you're picking mushrooms, the pickers themselves have skills. They have to look at they have to observe the size of the mushroom, the stem, the size of the stem, the basically the look of the mushroom, and how it's crowded. So there's the human involvement, human technique. So the vision part. So that part of automation there's a lot of opportunity to innovate in. It's the most challenging part of the automation for horticulture. So where you need to bring in the human aspect and use vision systems with machine learning and artificial intelligence, that's the part that requires a good amount of innovation in it at this stage.
And extending that to pack lines, processing plants, and other warehouses, one of the issues through COVID has been not only physical distancing in the fields, but also along those packing lines as well. Have there been any new innovations, or are there any specific challenges to overcome there?
So if you look at the post-harvesting aspect, we're finding that there's actually a good amount of companies that actually has access to products that they bring in from abroad, from Germany, the U.S., or Holland.
Mm-hmm.
They're able to bring these solutions here and modify them to be able to implement them to fit their warehousing needs or their packaging requirements. So there are technologies out there today, but most of it is actually from abroad. Again, the challenge for these producers is that you need someone to be able to help you to bring the technology abroad and modify it to basically to fit in with the Canadian standards as well.
Right.
So that's the challenge that exists for them, but the technology is there. There is technology out there to help you with packaging. There is technology there to help you with the warehousing aspect of things. Most of it's from abroad, but we need that bridge from abroad to be able to transfer to Canadian standards as well.
So looking ahead at the future of automation in produce, what does that future look like to you?
That's a very good question. One of the things that we do here at Vineland that's very interesting is that we try to get the engineering to work with actually the biology aspect, so the plant growth structure. So one of the things that we're learning over the future of automation in horticulture potentially is that how we're going to grow these plants in a way to accommodate automation and not the other way around. So today we're building automation solutions where we have to make sure these solutions can fit in the current structure or architecture of greenhouses or farms, right? In the future, what you're going to find out is even how you grow those plants. You have to grow the crops in a way that can actually become more optimal for automation solutions.
Mm-hmm. So that's even going back to pre-harvest technology too.
Yes, how you grow these plants. So basically, if you look at, I'll give an example of, for example, cucumbers. Traditionally, how they're grown versus now where we're seeing the way that the methodology of being grown in a high wire formation today, what that's doing basically, it's allowing the easy access for automation solutions to be able to pick them better. So it's a much easier exercise to develop an automation solution for a high wire grown cucumber versus the traditional way. And what that does is, again, helps with reducing the cost. If you can build a solution to automate the picking aspect of those cucumbers in a methodology, and that requires the pre-harvesting, how you grow these cucumbers, as example, high wire. And we're seeing now other crops, for example, tomatoes and other crops are moving towards that higher wire methodology because it allows you to be able to pick them. They're hung, you can come in and you can put solutions in, and the robotic solution, the automation solution, will have a better access to the crop and be able to pick it.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's about making a controlled environment as controlled as possible.
Agreed.
It's really interesting. Hussam, thank you so much for joining this episode. It's been really insightful.
Thank you as well, Ian, and thanks for having me. And it was a good conversation, and look forward to having more in the near future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks a lot. After the break, we'll talk more about automation with Shelley Fellows from Automate Canada, and we'll talk about technology along the blueberry supply chain with Jason Smith from the BC Blueberry Council. Stay tuned.
Hi everyone, it's Sarah here from Nature Fresh Farms. Robotic automation is being introduced more and more into the greenhouse industry to ensure the highest levels of quality. At Nature Fresh Farms, we embrace the latest technologies, software programs, and machinery helping us to grow consistently fresh and flavorful produce. As we incorporate new innovations at various levels of our operations, we are able to ship our products to customers and consumers safely and efficiently. For more information on our growing operations, visit www.naturefresh.ca.
Next on the show is Shelley Fellows from Automate Canada. Welcome, Shelley.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
You are the chair of Automate Canada. Can you tell me a little bit more about that role and maybe a little bit about Automate Canada?
Well, Automate Canada is a relative newcomer on the industrial automation scene in Canada. The association was actually formed about 2 years ago. So we are very much newcomers. And the association was formed to represent industrial automation companies from Canada. Now, those two words, industrial automation, actually span a very diverse sector because we count among our members and in our industry companies who range from specialists on, plant floor, IT, architecture, and hardware, through software companies, all the way up to machine builders, and everything in between, controls and robotics and machine vision. So it is a fairly broad base, but also fascinating. And I came to be involved with the organization and was asked to chair the group because of my involvement over the years, along with two partners. We had formed a company in the mid-90s that at the time was focused strictly on software development for manufacturing. And through the years, through the decades, expanded into pretty much the gamut of the industry that I just described. So we started off as a strictly software technology firm, and currently are machine and automation designers, builders for a range of industry sectors. And again, pretty representative of our industry, because industrial automation companies, it's very tempting, at least where I sit, and I sit down in Essex County, just outside of Windsor, Ontario, so pretty much an automotive heartland.
Right.
And that's my base. So it's very tempting to think of industrial automation as serving only the automotive manufacturing industry. And while we do, we also work with a range of industries, from aerospace to consumer electronics, and into food and agriculture, which I guess is why we're talking today.
Exactly. So yeah, and I mean, it's great to have you on, to hopefully share some insight in terms of, some new developments and kind of what's coming down the pipe in the automation world. Being based out of Windsor, Essex County, also a hub for produce and agriculture.
Absolutely.
So, and I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the labor challenges that some growers have faced over recent months. Looking at the food sector, the produce sector, have you seen an increase in demand and usage of automation? And do you think that the pandemic will lead to more demand or more of a push towards automation and technology?
One of my favorite things of being involved in this, incredibly fascinating sector, industrial automation, is that we get to go behind the scenes. We get to go right down on the plant floor and see how a nuclear reactor is built, or how gummy bears are produced, or aircraft engines and vehicle parts. The other thing that we get to see is what happens at the growers level, and it makes me smile because we look at the produce that we purchase in the grocery store or at the market, and it can be really hard to envision the technology that's behind getting that product to the grocery shelf or the market shelf. Growers have been very automated for quite some time, and it's always been really impressive to me. I can remember walking into, in the Windsor-Essex region, we've got the Haroun Research Center. Walking into the Haroun Research Center for the very first time, it was quite a while ago, and seeing what a greenhouse grown tomato plant looked like and just having my mind blown over what that was, and then walking through their facility and other facilities to see the level of automation in sorting and grading and packaging, and their desire to automate some of the other activities, the movement of the product around the greenhouses and into the packaging areas, picking, the climate management and data management, traceability. So the growers, to me, are already quite automated and have a strong desire. The opportunity that I see specifically for Canada and our domestic industrial automation sector is encouraging the collaboration between the Canadian companies who have some incredible capability and technology to offer to the growers and packagers in Ontario and elsewhere in Canada. Mm-hmm. It's, there has been a dominant force for the greenhouse sector anyway, and that is the technology that comes from Holland. They have done an absolutely remarkable job as a country to promote their domestic automation for greenhouses sector, and we do lag in that. There are certainly pockets of research and development and commercial development that is very encouraging, and there are efforts like by industry associations like Automate Canada, but also the OGVG. I don't need to spell that one out to you. I normally have to spell it out to people.
No.
You understand what OGVG is, and so will your listeners. But in partnership with associations and organizations like that, to say, you know what, we've got some capability right here in your backyard. And down in Essex County, it literally is in the backyard of the growers, but elsewhere as well. And let's see what we can do to put these sectors together to enhance the collaboration between them.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we talked about on my last interview with Hussam Haroun from Vineland Research.
Oh, of course.
Was system integration, right? You have all of these different technologies coming from different sources that don't necessarily speak to one another. Is that something that Automate Canada and its members, are working towards resolving? And one of the questions I asked him that maybe you could expand on is, whose role is that in facilitating that collaboration and working through systems integration?
It's a challenging question because it is, to certain companies, there are really kind of like two camps. There are the ones who believe fervently in the value of open source. Let's make everything open. Let's see how that stimulates innovation, and let's go forward for the greater good. And then there are those who say, no, we want to develop closed proprietary systems that, if you buy the razor from us, you must buy that razor blade. No other razor blade will fit our razor. And in the automation world, it's, no other hardware can plug into this system. And so you are required to continue to return to the vendor over and over again. And that certainly has, happens with products and equipment in the greenhouse sector, just like it happens with products and equipment in other manufacturing sectors. The move, though, that sort of, let's call it the open source camp, that move is pushing the needle away from highly proprietary, you're locked in to these systems for the rest of the working life of your facility, to being more open, being more able to integrate a range of technologies into a platform. And because it does make sense. It really does. It makes sense for everybody.
Right.
You're not hostage to a company's, product line. You're not hostage to the functions and capabilities that they offer. You are able to choose from a whole range of products and equipment and technologies that, allow us to recognize that there are great similarities between operations, but there are also some pretty significant differences, and there is no one size fits all. And we must have flexibility. I mean, that's one of the key words of manufacturing across the board, right? Flexibility. So we must be able to achieve flexibility in our operations, because that total cost of ownership of the technology goes way up when you're locked into a proprietary system or platform.
Right. No, I guess in my mind, I think the more open these technologies are, more open source, it helps drive everyone forward, right?
Absolutely.
It helps promote more innovation and makes it more possible.
Absolutely.
Talking more about harvest automation and robotics around produce, there are certain challenges like variation. When you talk about, obviously, you're familiar with the automotive robotics and automation, for example, that's much more of a staged setup. Even in agriculture with, something like grain, you don't get much variation, making automation more practical. What advances in automation technology have come out recently or, are coming down the pipe to help with this challenge of variation?
2 words. I have 2 words for you. Artificial intelligence.
Yes. Yeah.
That is a huge game changer. And the AI, artificial intelligence technology that I'm most familiar with is AI for machine vision. So something that previously was exceedingly challenging, how to distinguish. I mean, the intelligence of the human brain, we really don't understand the complexity of how we process things. Our cognitive processing abilities are remarkable, way better than machines in the past. Artificial intelligence, though, those algorithms, that method of analysis and learning, the machine learning, really has advanced, at least on the vision processing side, has advanced the state of the art remarkably. I mean, light years. So distinguishing, a cucumber, a mini cucumber from a leaf, which was challenging in the past. Now it is something that can be trained into the algorithms and can be successfully, repeatably, accurately performed by machine vision. And if machine vision can distinguish and determine the position of the, in this case, I use the example of a cucumber. If it can determine the position of the cucumber, then transferring that position data to a robotic arm is a snap, and has been for a long time. Okay, so you transfer that information over to the robotic arm, and you go in and you pick, and you pick accurately, and in a way that is very reliable. So to me, artificial intelligence is the innovation that has been transformative across the board for manufacturing and production, and will have a tremendous impact on greenhouse operations.
And as machine learning gets stronger, that will get more and more practical for other crops, and AI gets more and more advanced. It will increase those capabilities.
Absolutely. To me, that's a biggie, but also advances in traceability and data analysis. So all of the data that goes along with that. So food production traceability and being able to uniquely identify, down to the individual piece, and sustain all of the data that comes along with that. Tremendous amount of information, and so advances in being able to analyze and make some predictions around that. The phrase, another 2-word phrase that people tend to use is big data, right? So
Yeah.
that kind of traceability analysis really can be looked at as a big data analysis. And so variability in a whole number of conditions around growing, whether it's under glass or in the field, the traceability and then all of that data around it as part of big data analysis will, I think, also be very, very useful in optimizing productivity and production. But in terms of automation, to me, it's the application of artificial intelligence.
Another complexity that comes to mind that we've talked a little bit in the past about on the show is fragility of certain fruits and vegetable crops, thinking about like strawberries, for example. Have you seen any advances to help overcome the complexity of fragility?
So we can use machine vision to accurately identify where the cherry tomato is in space, and we can get a robot arm to that tomato, and you reach it out with the grippers, and the grippers promptly squash the cherry tomato or damage the skin. I mean, even something that's traditionally perceived as a fairly robust product like a pepper, if you're causing any form of damage to the skin, it reduces the shelf life, the longevity of the product. And we don't want that, right? Because then you're sacrificing for the sake of automation, productivity. Now your waste goes up. And I have seen things that range from suction grippers to sort of static electricity driven sheets that can, gently grasp the product. That particular challenge is going to take a lot of really grassroots experimentation, research and development. I mean, it's just working with educational institutions with lots of really smart engineers, mechanical to materials to electrical, and putting all that together and working closely with the various industries. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to advance the gripping technology.
Okay, so I mean, before we wrap up, I think it's important to talk about maybe some of the barriers and talk about ROI, right? I mean, I think when it comes down to it, that's the big question mark for growers, especially for small to medium-sized farms, where the margins are already small, and adopting automation and more technologically advanced systems, really is a significant investment. What are some of the considerations for growers when considering, an automated system, when determining if it's the right move for them and, how they can get the best ROI possible?
Aside from organizations that are purely driven by the esoteric, pursuit of the most advanced technology, costs, are not a factor. Aside from those organizations, and there aren't very many of them, it's all about the ROI. You've got to have a justification, and whether you're a grower or a manufacturer of beer, you've got to have the financial justification. You're taking capital and investing it into equipment and technology that, and at the end of a period of time, needs to start returning back to you in terms of improvements in quality, efficiency, productivity, flexibility, and it's got to do so in a way that is not going, you're not going to lose market share or customer satisfaction. And it's an equation that you can be producing a high ticket item like a vehicle, or an individual low cost item like a piece of candy or, something like a cherry tomato, you still have to have the understanding of what the return on investment is. And so when I think about it, I think about the lessons that we learned at Radix. I said I'm based out of Essex County, so a lot of automotive in Essex County, and we our very first customers were in the automotive industry, and the lessons we learned in the approach that automotive takes to doing exactly what you said, that analysis of return on investment, the understanding of what a $20,000, $50,000, $1 million project would return to the bottom line and the balance. So the profit and loss and the balance sheet of the organization is critical. So for growers and for commercial operations, there certainly is a scale factor. You have to be of a certain volume in order to justify. That's where part of that return on investment comes into it. So you have to be of a certain volume to justify the investment. Again, whether it's a $50,000 investment or $1 million investment. But you also have to, so that's the financial side of it. There's also the technical and the support side of it, because to contemplate a robotic picking investment, for example, so automation for robotic picking, you need to have an understanding of that equipment at your facility, because you can't be calling the supplier of the technology all the time to come and service it or make a small change or make a tweak. So you do also have to factor in not just the capital cost, but what the cost is to support, maintain, and continue to use the technology. So that's something that is sometimes overlooked, and yet is pretty important. And there are some creative ways to deal with things like that. And there are certainly companies whose entire business model is helping, or manufacturers or production operations deal with it, right, in terms of contracting robot programmers, as in that particular example. But that is something that needs to be considered when they are considering a particular investment in technology or equipment.
Yeah, no, it certainly would be not just a significant financial investment, but also an investment of time and
yes,
shifting entire processes.
Yes, absolutely.
When bringing in new technology. So, well, Shelley, it's really great insight to get your perspective from that industrial automation side. So thank you so much for joining the podcast. Really appreciate your time.
You're very welcome. It was great to talk to you today, and have a great day.
On the line now is Jason Smith, a blueberry grower, consultant, and chair of the finance committee with BC Blueberry Council. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
This interview, I'd like to get a glimpse of automation and technology in the berry world, in the blueberry world. But first, I got to say, I tried dried blueberries for the first time a couple months ago, and man, they're so good. They're like candy.
Yeah, they can be quite good. There's different types of dried, and it's pretty interesting, the different profiles depending on which drying process the fruit has been through.
Yeah. So talking about automation, getting into it here, I've read that the majority of blueberries in BC are machine harvested, but I mean, similar to across any sector, across any commodity, there are still a lot of hands on the farm. Blueberry growers, also delve a lot into packing, sorting, processing, like, the dried blueberries, for example. How has technology and automation helped blueberry growers through the pandemic?
I think without the ability to machine harvest, the fruit, we would be in a real tough situation. Um, I think it's given the ability for people to actually get the fruit harvested. We're already facing a labor shortage prior to this whole pandemic, and then this just kind of added another layer to it. And, it has forced many growers that perhaps have never machine harvested or worked with that type of harvest style to go towards it just in order to get the fruit off the plants and to the packers.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the challenges I've heard is that, some of these harvesting machines can really be quite expensive. They aren't necessarily feasible for, small to medium-sized farms. Do you agree with that? And, can you elaborate a little bit on, that some of the price points around some of these harvesting machines?
There's different models and they have different levels of cost. They are very expensive. Even some of the simpler type harvesters can be up to $200,000 Canadian. There are some other smaller kind of tow behind the tractor type models which are significantly cheaper than that, but that doesn't necessarily work well when you have really big mature plants. They would be more for the medium and smaller type plants where, when you're pulling the harvester through the plants with the tractor, you're not knocking off all the fruit, and so if you get into larger plants with that type of a machine, you're going to be knocking off a bunch of the fruit before it even gets to the harvester. So, but yeah, there are different price points. I've seen a lot of growers kind of partner up with neighbors or friends or whatever and purchase one together.
Mm-hmm.
There is also a number of people who have bought harvesters who do custom picking as well. So, a lot of the growers who maybe can't justify the cost for a machine, at least directly around my farm, have been using the service of some of these custom harvest guys.
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously a significant investment, not only implementing, this new equipment, but also new processes, which is especially true when there is a shorter growing and harvesting season. How can growers best determine if investing in technology is the right move for them?
I think every grower needs to look at their own situation and type of operation they're running. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of change now because of this pandemic, and it may speed up the transition, and implementation of more technology in blueberry operations. So like we've been talking about the picking machines, we've seen a lot of that this year. But there may be other things that come along as well, robotic weeders, things like that. But it all boils down to the cost. And when you're operating on very thin margins, there definitely needs to be a net benefit, towards purchasing and implementing the use of different technologies. And the technologies are always changing and evolving, and so trying to stay on top of it and making sure you do your research and get the right product that's good for you and the way you're running your operation is always important.
Mm-hmm. Have there been any breakthroughs or more use perhaps with automated systems, with the more advancement in AI? Have you seen, or do you think that there's going to be more use of more automation?
I think it's coming. There's a lot of work being done definitely on different technologies for different areas. Some of it involves like, drones and other sensors and monitors in the field for disease and pest monitoring. as well as, weather stations with soil moisture meters to run your irrigation system to make sure you're, irrigating as efficiently as possible and not wasting water. But also it's eliminating, some of the time that needs to be spent by people. There's definitely been a improvement in post-harvest processing equipment. A lot of new technology. There's a number of companies now with equipment that allows you to see 360 degrees of each berry as it's going over the packing and sorting line to really assess the quality of that fruit and grade it appropriately, right?
Right. Make sure it's ready to go into packaging.
Correct. And that's replacing some of the, job that was done by people. Some of these new lines, you need very few people to run it, whereas before you'd have 15 to 20 people on a line. And so, things like that are definitely major labor savings. And if you're running enough volume, you could justify the cost, right?
Yeah, no, and that's one area where, especially early on in the pandemic, was, the challenges for many processing plants, packing and processing plants, was how do you physically distance staff along a line? So, aside from cost and investment, I mean, are there any other barriers or considerations for grower, packer, shippers to adopting, more automated systems?
Some of the equipment requires a pretty large footprint to install and have operating, and if space could be a challenge. It could be a limitation. If you have existing infrastructure and you've got to fit equipment inside of it, that could be a challenge. Or you need to knock down a couple walls and get the permits and in order to have the room to put in some of this equipment, and that all takes time, and it takes a lot of planning, and it's not something like we have a pandemic. Oh, I'm just gonna call this guy up and slap in one of these new lines, and
right.
I don't have to worry about labor then, right? Like it's more of a longer term planning process involved with some of those things for sure. So that, I guess, would be one of the limitations.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting to see if more growers begin to adopt more of these systems and invest in new facilities and so on.
Yeah, and we're where we are with our agricultural land reserve. It's not necessarily going to be super easy to just put up a new building to put in a new piece of equipment, right? There's definitely a process that you have to go through to get your approvals and things like that. And that's all there for a reason. And but it just you got to plan ahead, and it definitely takes time. I mean, one of the other things too is the ability to, it's great to have all this nice new equipment and technology, but training people and to operate it and working out any kinks and stuff like that all will take time as well. At that point you're going to require maybe a higher skill set of people to bring into your operation to help operate some of these different pieces of equipment, whether it's packing or different other things happening outside of the packing house. So
right. There's more variables that come into play there for sure. Well, listen, thank you so much, Jason, for your time and your insight. Great to get your perspective.
Hey, no problem. Have a good day. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks again to Jason, Shelley, and Hussam for joining me on this episode. To our listeners, if you have any suggestions for future topics, you can send them in to me, Ian Brody, at ibrodie@cpma.ca. Until next time, fill half your plate with fruits and veggies, continue to seek out new knowledge, and basically never stop growing.